Hey everybody, welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we review every single Best Picture nominee. Today, we are talking about the other half of the duo that we're doing. It's Barbie. Last time we talked about Oppenheimer. Barbie, if you didn't hear about this movie, what? You must have simply been living under a rock or maybe at the bottom of the ocean or in Barbie Land. Because this thing was big news.
They probably would have heard about it.
I feel like they would have.
They had a limited theatrical release there.
That's like Americans not hearing about American Sniper.
Yeah.
Perfect correlation.
Perfect. That's the film that we're going to discuss today. How does it stack up as a Best Picture potential winner? I don't know. We've got to deliberate and find out. But first, I'm going to remind you of what we talked about last time because we hit the other summer box office duo smasher, Chris Nolan's Oppenheimer, and we liked that film a fair amount. We had a lot of praise to heap on it. We had some qualms here and there, but, you know.
Don't tell anyone that, though.
No. Just watch the review. You can find out all of our little intricate, nuanced thoughts on that film. But in short, we gave it a 9.1, which put it at the third spot on our list. So pretty high up there amongst a list of fairly good films.
Yeah, there's no bad scores on this list.
Not really, no. So
actually, I don't know if we've ever given a nominee a bad score, like below 5. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we have.
Yeah, interesting.
We've definitely given some Best Picture winners low scores. I would say
there's no bad scores. All scores that we hand out are good.
Because they're correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And just.
They're good,
Sure,
correct, and
That's
justified.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Now, we got
What's
one.
Barbie get?
I don't know. We got one final piece of homework, housekeeping, whatever you call it. It's actually quite fun. I enjoy it. The featured comment, Abram, what have you got for us this time?
Are you doing this? I'm going to go get a tissue because I want to be sniffling this entire review.
Well, it's good that I picked a...
one that's about the length of your phone screen, which is about the average length of an Abram comment.
This comes from a Poor Things review. It comes from a new member of the community, David Hassler, 9842.
Shout out. That's my dad's friend over in
There
Portugal.
we go.
Shout out, David.
Shout out, David.
Hi, David. David says the following. Hola, listening to you fellas from Portugal. One thing I think you could have added would be that 1, Bella grew. She started with the mind of a baby, thus black and white film. If you remember, they talked about how she was maturing much faster than a normal human. She grew into a woman. 2, an homage to the Wizard of Oz. When Bella left her life and began experiencing a different world, Technicolor was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
3, the entire set was surrealistic. Dolly would have been enchanted. 4, the most important thing to me as a woman is that she experienced no shame, none. She totally lived and grew in the moment. Her vocabulary was babyish, but then grew into a philosophical woman. But for me, the fact that we expect her to have filters and shame, when she discovered sex, it wasn't sex. It was finding her power. Sex equals power. And she enjoyed and found no shame in her enjoyment when others felt she needed blinders. Just one woman's thought. Also, I saw an homage to Alice Through the Looking Glass, too.
Wow. All right.
Very nice.
Love a good reference to Alice Through the Looking Glass.
The Wizard of Oz parallel is very good. And,
I do enjoy that.
And in hindsight, very obvious, but I did not consider that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. The visual language conveys roughly the same thing, so good catch. Tucker's, hang on, he's standing in the doorway, he's considering...
Tanner, will you vamp for us and give us a little plot synopsis, a little recap of what Barbie is? It's another film that, I don't know how you would have missed it, but just in case we've got some viewers who don't know what this film's business is, what's Barbie all about?
Gentlemen, Barbie is about Barbie. Barbie is she's more of an idea, I guess. As we'll discuss this maybe a little bit. It plays fast and loose with where is Barbie Land? What is Barbie Land? In fact, it makes several jokes at the expense of this idea.
Of its own ideas.
Barbie is an idea who exists in Barbie Land with the other Barbies, the other Kens, assorted Allens and Midges and weird Barbies and things of that nature. But she soon discovers that things are going askew in Barbie Land, especially for her. This is caused by somebody in the real world who has gone through some emotional strife that is connected to Barbie and the connection that humans form with their dolls. So she has to venture out into the real world, sunny Los Angeles. Tagging along with her is, of course, Ken, And they discover that things are not so right as rain over in the real world. Feminism has not, has not taken over. There is still rampant misogyny and patriarchy running throughout the real world, of which Ken is very enlightened to learn and very elated to learn. He takes that back to Barbie Land and turns it into his very own Kendom. And Barbie and the real characters, whose names are Gloria and
Sasha,
thank you. Have to go over there, rescue the Barbies who have become sort of slaves to the patriarchy. I would say,
they say in the film,
brainwashed perhaps, and sort of set Barbie Land right with maybe some greater understanding learned by all parties. So that's roughly the plot of Barbie.
that's
pretty good understanding.
Yeah.
Now, before we give predictions, thoughts on this film.
Yes.
I do want to point out how funny it is that
I predict it'll make $1 billion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Us four guys are going to talk about this film because if I may start by, I don't know, putting a little, this is some thoughts of mine, that this is a film for the ladies. And so I will admit that my conception of it is limited by my understanding of this here world as a guy. And I think that perhaps this film speaks on a different level to women who it is much more interested in talking directly to. Although it does have quite a lot of, I would say, salt for guys in the audience to, lick or taste upon. But
what the hell?
Yeah, a Bill salt lick of toxic masculinity that also underlines this film.
Yeah,
We'll get to
but
all
also
that in due
positive
time.
masculinity.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess since I started
we
with
should talk
that,
about
I'll throw out my thoughts just because I'm
Come on.
taking the reins right here. This is a blockbuster, funny, well-made film that is pretty enjoyable to watch and has some largely heartwarming and I think relevant and mostly well-intentioned and put together themes in it. It's a blockbuster. This is a film that, to me, exemplifies what Samuel Goldwyn was thinking about when he founded the Academy, is the mixture of art and business. And this film is...
And feminism.
And
Samuel
feminism.
Goldwyn.
Yes, noted feminist.
Uh-huh.
This film is perfect for the Academy because it has a lot of artistic tendencies to it. I think that there's wonderful work going on in the score, in the production design, in the costumes, and I think the screenplay is pretty good. The direction is quite excellent. But it also made $1 billion at the box office and was a worldwide phenomenon, which
$1.6 billion.
Yeah.
That's a lot of
that's
money.
1.5. More than.
Uh-huh.
So this film, I think, stands apart from a lot of our typical Best Picture fare in its rampant popularity, which is something that I believe warrants discussion and consideration in this film, because, well, this film was not intended to be an art house, 20 screenings kind of film. This film was built from the ground up to get a lot of viewers, and that shows. And so it feels kind of different, I think, than your, more art house, more awards baity films. But it's still good nonetheless and enjoyable to watch.
Well, I think that positioning of this film in both realities is what makes this one of my favorite Best Picture nominees in recent memory. And not that it's one of my favorite movies, but I'm so glad that this does exist as a crossing between of the two worlds, because not only is this up there with all the other nominees we're talking about in terms of in its crafts and in the production design and in the costumes, it easily deserves to be nominated for all these things. I'm glad that it's being recognized. But I also think that as a blockbuster, as a fun movie with fun characters and a recognizable IP based on things that people have nostalgia for, I think this movie has a lot more going for it in terms of its themes and its intention and the directorial vision that really clearly comes through in so many different places where I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, it's Mattel and Warner Brothers that are financing this, and it's giving them a bunch of money and propping up their IP and brands. But Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie had a stranglehold on this thing, and they were making decisions that you would not see in any other movie with this kind of budget and making this much money. And I think that it's phenomenal because of that. I mean, I not only think this is a great movie, it's very entertaining. I was laughing a ton. I think it has great themes and great messaging, but it's down the line great in all its crafts areas too. And so it's just a perfect melding of things that, even though I don't like it more than something like Top Gun Maverick or Avatar: Way of Water, other big blockbusters.
Movies for boys.
For the boys. Movies that we talked about in this exact same context in previous years. I think it's a more exciting and interesting winner, or not winner, a nominee, being in this conversation, because it feels much more like what you would say a blockbuster, just like, oh, it's like simple and fun and flashy and all that stuff.
To use a film school term, it's like a tentpole film, and we don't often get to talk about studio tentpole films on this show.
Yeah. I mean, the ones that Tucker named we talked about last year, but there is this.
I think those are the only three that we've talked about.
Yeah. There's a growing contingent from last year into this year of
I would also say Oppenheimer is that.
Oh, yeah, it
almost made $1 billion.
Yes, and Oppenheimer being the
Did we talk about No Way Home?
No, that didn't get nominated. I mean, we did talk about No Way Home, but that's besides the point. What I'm saying is that there is a growing contingent of auteur-driven tentpole films that get acclaim from critics, audiences, and awards bodies alike. And it's really exciting to be reviewing these films and in all of those contexts. So yes, we'll be talking about this film as a nominee for Best Picture and as a nominee for 7 other categories.
Segue.
Including two song nominations. For I'm Just Ken and What Was I Made For. Supporting actress, America Ferrera. Supporting actor, Ryan Gosling. Adapted screenplay for Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach. Achievement in production design and achievement in costume design.
Mm-hmm.
Best Picture.
And Best Picture. Well, I said 7 other aside from Best Picture.
8 total.
But yeah, I mean, I also agree that it's a fucking straight down the line, goddamn really fun movie.
This is probably the most family-friendly movie we maybe ever reviewed, and you're just coming out with with all the curse.
I can't say goddamn, you know?
I never curse.
That's true. We're keeping this one PG-13 for the kids. But
we used our one word.
But it has its idiosyncrasies, and I think that only makes it stand out all the more. At the same time, however, I think there are some aspects of it that, as Barbie has sort of grown to be the biggest thing of last year, people have sort of criticized about it, and I feel like those criticisms either fall flat or maybe hold some water, and I'd like to get to those.
Okay. Abram.
Here's my film about Barbie.
Okay.
And I'll put it in terms that I understand as Star Wars.
All right.
Christ.
Another movie for boys.
When the Andor show came out, the Andor show got a lot of praise for having politically leftist ideology very overtly throughout the narrative.
Yeah. So all those other conservative Star Wars movies you've been getting.
There was a big there's a big contingent of people who said Andor cannot be like functionally leftist due to the fact that it was made by Disney.
Right. Yeah.
I've always disagreed with that because I'm generally of the opinion that you need to bring these ideologies and ideas to people where they already are.
Yeah.
So I think that it's very, very cool that Barbie is not a particularly deep feminist text. I think it's especially important as our culture continues to become more and more socially reactionary and conservative in some ways, that we have a film that is just reinforcing basic and essential ideas about feminism. I think that Barbie is a really exciting film through that lens. I also think it's really annoying. This is my second time watching it. I'm like, I just think that this is I find it very shouty. Okay. And that's a style of humor that I understand a lot of people like.
Yeah.
But like when they're on the beach and Ken has fallen over and everyone's just like screaming, or it's when her feet go flat and everyone's just screaming, what kind of people screaming. I'm like, I get why this is popular. For me, it's very grating.
Sure. Okay.
I also find that this film is very strongly directed in some respects, but in others, I think that there's absolutely no voice or texture or vision to it. Sure. I think that the stuff in the real world looks terrible, and I think that the choreography and clear business decisions behind it make it very...
Holy shit.
Hey, you were sort of just speaking word to the things. I was like, oh, we'll get to those.
Yeah. I think that Barbie is so obviously a film that had a set of moneyed interests behind it and an audience to hit, that it makes a lot of steps to hit that to me are alienating. Although I was never the target demographic for Barbie, I do contend, even though we've been joking about it, I do think this is a film for everybody, and I think they do a good job of managing appeal no matter who you are. But for me, I find a lot of the humor very annoying. I think a lot of the film, the way it's shot and edited and just conceptualized, is not to the quality bar that I expect from the people behind the camera. So I'm mixed on Barbie, but I agree with you guys 100% that it is a very cool and important nominee all the same.
Sure. No, I don't want to start on the "is Barbie a feminist" text discourse. I don't.
That'll come out over the course of the.
I explicitly do not want to start there. Where I would like to start is. Well, I just wanted to make sure.
The boundaries, Tucker. They are important.
Hold it or put a pin in it.
Yeah.
I want to start with Barbie Land, where the film starts. Well, actually, the film starts with the 2001 homage. That was the teaser for this film that I really loved, and I think sets a different tenor going forward, like, immediately. Like, obviously, not everyone watched the teaser as soon as it dropped on YouTube and everything, but it not only sort of lays the groundwork for, hey, this is a movie about dolls and what they kind of mean, and how they might display themselves and how they might act as real, living, breathing, thinking things. But also just the sort of like I like the word idiosyncratic thing that Greta Gerwig is doing with Barbie. Is like, how are we going to open it with a fucking parody of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then go immediately into Helen Mirren narrating spinning actresses dressed up as different Barbies, and then go right into a Lizzo song that's narrating Barbie's morning routine. It's really fun and ingratiates you immediately back into it. I hadn't seen this film since July or whatever.
Yeah, me too.
And I was, I had been thinking about it quite a bit. I was seeing the discourse about it quite a bit. I was like, I don't know if I can settle back into Barbie and the world and the humor of it, but I did quite easily. I just melted right back into it and was having a lot of fun from basically those opening minutes.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And I actually feel that a lot stronger on this, my third watch, than I did on my other two watches, because you and I reviewed this movie on the day that it came out, and I mentioned pretty strongly in there that one of my biggest criticisms and the reason why it stayed away from being one of my favorites was that I felt probably largely similar to you, is that the comedy was kind of grating and it felt kind of simple. It's like, oh, we're just hitting the beats that you kind of expect. But on my third watch here, I was having so much fun in that opening hour, which is where the comedy is mostly situated. And I think it was because I really thought a little bit more about how actually kind of cool it is that so many of these stupid jokes actually made it into a movie like this. And it's so consistent in its tone of that it is taking a light tone with things and is referencing films that are not relevant to the target audience of this movie, but are adding a layer of creativity and reverence and meta commentary. And from my perspective, care. Like, you can feel that not Margot Robbie, that Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach are huge film fans and are giant film buffs and are both well-respected directors, that most directors would not include a reference to another movie as the opening scene for their movie. And I feel the way that they intertwine references and their joke style and the themes, it all, I think, comes into fruition in that first hour of the film, where I think everything is really firing on all cylinders. And then that second half of the film, I think, takes a different approach, which is a little bit more serious and is a little more self-reflexive and does get into a little bit more of the sort of raw themes and emotions that this film has. And I think that balance works really well. But I was laughing constantly in the opening section of this movie. When I found the opening song annoying the first time I saw Barbie, this time I found it absolutely hilarious.
Sure.
It was just so much fun. Like, as I said, melt back into the world of Barbie. It's such an inviting film in that way.
I find myself that I'm kind of like in between Abram. I can't decide if I think that the jokes are funny or stupid, because I think that they are kind of dumb. It's like it's low-hanging fruit, most of the humor in this film, but it's still fruit. It's still funny and like enjoyable, but it's like, is it dopey? It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. Like, it's because of the way that it's situated. I think that because the whole genre of this film's comedy comes from, like Abram said, this kind of screamy, yelly, like meta modern humor, like humor that's very situated as like how things are funny right now. This movie's playing with that, and because it is right now, it's funny and it succeeds. And I'm not gonna be like, well, down the road, screw that. Right now, I am sort of annoyed by it, but I also giggle at this movie. Like, I'm laughing by it too. So what can you really like? These are the two. Some of the jokes land for me, and some of them don't. I think it's really a case by case basis. But it is still enjoyable. And I like all the songs. The songs in this film like definitely do add to it. And like Tucker said, you pay attention to the lyrics and you're like, this is really funny. And they're kind of like bouncing around between the song is talking about the action, and then the actions kind of end up referring to the song, and then like the character's like, wait, no, sing about me. And like that's like, this very self-awareness that this film is going for, which is important, because even though, as not talking about it as a feminist text, but as a feminist text, it needs to acknowledge that it's also coming from the horse's mouth, that it's coming from Mattel, and that this like kind of trying to be progressive, but also like extremely overtly consumerist at the same way. These idiosyncrasies, which you guys were talking about earlier, need to be addressed via the meta humor of the film. I think its own understanding of its own creation should be on display, and it is. Because otherwise, I think some of the messaging that it's trying to go for falls a little bit flat. And the humor is largely how it constructs that meta knowledge.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we'll talk per tenor. We'll talk about the themes later. And I think that you're right to know, like, Mattel as a central character in the film, I think is maybe the one thing that Barbie on a humor level tries to escape with meta humor that I don't think it can.
Yeah, that's fair.
But just looking at the film, like at a higher level, look at the opening sequence, I don't really like the whole 2001: A Space Odyssey shtick to begin with, although I understand why it's there.
Reference to a worse movie.
I don't disagree with you, actually.
You guys are wrong.
I'm right there with you, Timo. But continue, everyone.
But when we get into Barbie Land, I agree with you. I love the whole sequence of the Lizzo song, and I think that's really effective. But just on a higher level, I actually want to pull in the conversation some things you actually taught me, Tucker, about Everything Everywhere All at Once, and the Daniels very overtly pulling on like internet humor and internet culture for that movie. I think that Barbie is a much better touchstone for internet humor and culture than that was. In that I think that this, and I mean this as both a positive and a criticism, Barbie to me does feel like one massive like YouTube sketch.
Oh, absolutely. I mentioned in our initial review that it felt sort of SNL sketchy. Of like, I
was
we're just
gonna
doing the
say-
thing that's parodying the thing.
I was going to say it's like late night humor as opposed to me, as opposed to YouTube humor. Like maybe those things are kind of comparable, but continue.
I think the reason I'd lend a little bit more on the YouTube side is because I think, again, that the loudness of this movie and a lot of its humor is very internet-esque. And the very overt, I see your notes page over there. You've got Zack Snyder's Justice League right
I do. I abbreviated I was waiting ZSJL to hide it from you, but no.
Yeah, good luck, buddy.
Yeah, good luck.
I think that a lot of these homages, a lot of these direct call-outs, a lot of the yelling, a lot of the big dance numbers and the wacky costumes feels like very sort of Smosh-esque, if that's a touchstone that our audience understands. And it's interesting to me because Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig aren't young.
They're like at least 35, probably 40 plus.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that their ability to make this film feel young is cool, and that's why I mean it as both as a very subjective criticism, I think, but objectively part of like the rhetorical reason why this movie became the success that it was.
Sure.
I think it does speak to a younger sensibility, which is important.
I think it also just speaks to a different sensibility than we're used to seeing, particularly live action films from marquee creative directors take that angle. When you think about things that are appealing to a younger audience, that are loud and screaming, self-referential, I mean, Minions.
It's Illumination.
It's very Illumination.
Yeah.
But it does, I think, feel a lot more genuine than the Illumination style of humor that I think turns me away, because I understand Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig writing this for children, but having a better understanding of comedic timing and artistry through their production elements and their writing that I think makes it feel like they're in on the joke. And that's what I think is so cool about Barbie, is even when it is referencing Mattel not having almost any female CEOs.
They had two.
We're literally a corporation built on women. I think that is not only a really funny sequence, and Will Ferrell is very good with his comedic timing, if that's any surprise to anyone.
Extremely.
But even when it is doing these things that feel like, when you think about them on sort of an external angle of like, oh, Mattel and Warner Brothers are referencing the fact that patriarchy exists and is still to this day like a rampant force in the production of major brands and films and all this, because it is coming from Greta Gerwig, and Margot Robbie and Noah Baumbach, who are people that I trust a little bit more on a creative side. It feels like I think SNL and YouTube and stuff is an apt comparison, because those are kind of things that are outside.
There's an authenticity to YouTube because
and
the
like
author is very centralized.
And an earnestness,
and
too.
I think that's true here.
That this film displays a very, like, it is clearly believing what it's saying, even when it's being goofy and silly. Like, it has some confidence and earnestness to it that, makes it, I think, for me, certainly less annoying than like an Illumination Minions type humor.
Yeah. I think the authenticity especially comes across when we're not doing our corporate jokes. I think sometimes those work and sometimes they don't. The one you referenced, Tucker, being one that does work. Yeah. I feel so that's two right there. Yeah. It's a funny joke, but it's also a little bit of like.
I'm a man without power. Does that make me a woman?
I was gonna talk. That's what I was exactly gonna talk about. That's not explicitly talking about the corporate aspect of it. When we're doing the Gerwig or Baumbach, probably Gerwig jokes. I had a fun little game running in my brain last night. I was like, that's a Gerwig joke. That's a Baumbach joke. That's a Gerwig joke. I think a lot of them that are about, misogyny feel like Gerwig jokes to me. Yeah. That's just like sort of her wheelhouse. A lot more than it is Noah Baumbach's, if you can believe it. But like, the I'm a man without power. Does that make me a woman? Or the very opening sequence when Barbie and Ken cross into the real world, and he's like, I can only feel what I can describe as admired with no undertone of violence. And then Margot Robbie comes back with that. Mine very much has an undertone of violence. Yeah. I, of course, do want to talk about Robbie and Gosling as Barbie and Ken, as the central figures of this film, the two names on the poster here. Mm-hmm. Because, and I'm actually going to do it right now. I'm going to talk about Margot Robbie. Because in those opening minutes, we are also introduced to, obviously, her. She is she's doing the whole song and dance and everything. Then we get the literal song and dance. And this is a scene that, I don't know, we were just...
the party scene?
The party scene. Sure. The bespoke song and the disco and everything. This is a scene where, we're transitioning out of us just talking about the writers and how they sort of incorporate different types of humor for modern audiences. And I'm gonna pare it back down to a very simple thing here. This sequence, set to Dance the Night by Dua Lipa,
Shout out Dua Lipa.
Shout out Dua Lipa.
Great song. I constantly get the yeah. And also they use that as a motif for the Mattel people, which I think is really funny. It has sort of this march aspect to it. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting way they play into specifically that song.
But not only is it fucking choreographed great, and you get a bunch of great moments from all the supporting characters like Issa Rae, and you get the cutaways to Michael Cera, which I fucking adore. The cutaways to Emerald Fennell, who I adore. But also, the moment when Margot Robbie comes back in and she's doing this whole arm swinging move, and she's looking straight down the barrel of the camera, and she's got a capital M, capital S movie star smile on her face. Sure. It's like, God damn, is she fucking perfect in this? And that really underscored my entire viewing of Barbie for the third time for me as well, is that Margot Robbie is really stellar in this. And of course, Greta Gerwig got a lot of she got snubbed at the Oscars attention. I also feel that Margot Robbie did. I mean, she was probably number 6 in that nomination list.
Well, she was number 5, but somehow Nyad.
Don't get me started.
Oh no.
Anyway, what I was going to say was that yes, she is fantastic in this, and a lot of attention and praise gets heaped on Ryan Gosling, and he even got the nomination here. But she delivers all of the same level of comedy, but it's just interspersed with these very earnest moments where she has to be a doll who has never experienced reality, experiencing emotions for the first time. It's an incredible sort of performance that is maybe sort of also done by Emma Stone.
I was going to say, it's kind of like Emma Stone.
But also with a very different tenor to it. But I fucking love Margot Robbie in this, and not only is that she displaying all of that, but she's sort of ascending to a plus tier position of a movie star here.
Mm-hmm. Let's just pause for a second. Someone rang the doorbell.
Yeah, I don't check that out.
I don't think
anyone else is home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. 2 days in a row. while recording.
What's going on?
People don't usually ring our doorbell.
The Unabomber has come for you guys.
What the fuck? What if we're sitting here recording our Barbie review and we hear an explosion upstairs?
And it'll all be on camera because it's being recorded from an offline location. Your house could blow up and I'd still get it on footage.
That is true. That is true.
Thank you, Timo. I really appreciate it.
Hey, I'm here for you.
You fucking people get a goddamn Amazon package every day.
Who is that for?
For Abram and John.
Oh, let's fucking go.
Hey, you people.
I don't know what it is. But the fucking UPS man also doesn't have to ring the doorbell.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't have to ring the doorbell. The one during the day doesn't ring the doorbell. It's the guy that comes at night that rings the doorbell.
That's weird.
Wake up, sleepyheads.
It comes at night.
Tanner just
No.
finished talking about Margot Robbie. Who wants
Margot
to hop
Robbie
in?
is a fucking A+ tier movie star.
Do you want to respond to that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Tanner, I completely agree. I can't say that on my first watch, Margot Robbie really left much of an impression on me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I noticed a lot more about her on my rewatch. This is my second time watching. I think that her sense of wit in the comedic scenes goes a little bit underappreciated, especially against Ryan Gosling, who's a much more...
Who's just doing clown work.
He's got a much more overstated role.
They asked Ryan Gosling to ham it up, and boy,
Yeah.
can that guy ham it up.
This is a Christmas ham.
He's a fucking honey glazed ham.
Yeah, and I think that Margot Robbie gets a little bit lost but not by any of her own error, but just because Ryan Gosling is so big. And from the beginning and still today, I'll continue to praise her dramatic work. I think that "You're So Beautiful" at the bus stop, or some of the moments she has with Ray Perlman at the end of the film are great, and they were back in July too. But I really do appreciate the sort of bubbly wit she brings to like confronting the popular girls at the lunch table.
Yeah, oh my god, that's such a good scene.
And then getting completely dismantled by them.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think that she doesn't have the big moments to pop. And even her dance number is obviously nothing like, I'm Just Ken. It doesn't have that sort of pomp and circumstance about it. But Margot Robbie, I think, on like a lower tenor, carries all of her comedic scenes extremely well.
Well, I think she does get the pop in the serious moments, because there's basically only one emotional moment that Ryan Gosling is able to portray as Ken, but Margot Robbie gets those throughout the entire film, and I think that what she and the script bring to the movie Barbie is that earnestness of her feeling like a genuine character, genuine person that is learning these things, and I think all of the thematic resonance of Barbie of charting your own path and not letting the decisions that other people make for you and the views of society dictate the way that you should go in your life. All of that, and learning about things for the first time and learning how to interact with people, all of that centers in on her because it isn't as clouded by comedic punches that can get some of those moments of interacting with people, but they're always played for jokes. And I think that the moments where the film feels like it's at its most real and human is, I think, especially that bus stop moment, and not necessarily her talking to Helen Mirren, but her looking off into the distance of these other people that are sharing moments, and she's kind of experiencing the range of human emotion for the first time, because for the first time in her life, things are not going great all the time, and so she sees people have laughing together and crying together, and a guy sitting by himself, and a dog, and all these things, and the cutbacks to her face, and the idea of it flooding into her that humanity is this range of emotions and the spectrum of possibilities of how a day can go. Watching her smile and then be empathetic and frown, and I'm that's some really good acting there. And she gets to play all up and down the spectrum of her emotions. And I like the way that it swings back and forth between those. I mean, we get her with as happy as a character has ever been because she's never experienced sadness in her entire life at the beginning, but then we get depression Barbie for a little bit where she's on the ground and she's disappointed in herself and she doesn't know where to go, and it's there's a lot here. I mean, this character covers the entire possibilities of what a person can experience.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's just something much more heartbreaking about when Margot Robbie is displaying those things. When we're doing, even though we do get the undercutting from the narration, being hey, don't cast Margot Robbie if you're trying to make a joke about how she doesn't feel pretty anymore. But there is just something that makes her, that because she is so talented, makes her feel much more grounded in those moments when they could still feel a bit melodramatic or over the top. They feel grounded in a film that is kind of anything but.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that Barbie is a very grounded character. And I pretty much agree with you guys. I mean, it kind of leads me to think about just like the general cartoonishness of this film. I was watching it and thinking back to, I recently watched the new live action Avatar: The Last Airbender. I watched the first episode of that. And where Barbie succeeds and that show fails is in CGI cartoonishness. The Avatar show doesn't really have any of that like playfulness, and like things are animated kind of funny, and they don't really look like real because they're not. Like Barbie Land and the way that just the visuals of this film, and I think that this plays very well into the humor of the film too, is cartoonish, and people like bounce off stuff, and the physics do not work like, you know, real world physics, and there's no water, it's like just plastic. So I think there's quite an achievement there in creating a live action like cartoon that is
totally. I mean,
and is very seamless. It really feels cartoonish, even though you're like, well, yeah, but that's Margot Robbie, which I think helps kind of sell everything that the movie's trying to sell. I mean, it feels like it's really happening, and yet you're like, but it's not really happening. But it's also a playland. I think that, I mean, Margot Robbie was perfect casting, despite the film's own admission that otherwise
she's not great for that moment.
Yeah.
I think it's commitment that really makes that sell through and through. Is there's not any moment where it doesn't work in the way that the rules have been established. Of course, things change when we go to the real world, and that juxtaposition is also played for humor. I especially like the moment, which is not only a great comedic moment, but a great moment of acting for Margot Robbie, where she's drinking tea for the first time, and she drinks the tea she does it, and she like swallows it weird. I'm like, that's probably really hard to do well, and she nails it in that moment. Of course, that is playing between the cartoon reality of Barbie Land, where cups never have anything in them, and she never actually had to drink anything, which is a great little thing. I noticed in one shot, like I think it's when Ken is about to like go run off and go into the waves at the beginning of the movie, and Emma Mackey's in the background. She's holding a drink, and she holds it up, and the straw is like an inch away from her face, but she's like. And I'm like, that is a commitment to the background characters and supporting cast and production design that I think works really well. And that is a underplayed element of production design and blockbuster filmmaking that has only been attempted a few times, and I think very, very rarely done very well. I'll give two other recommendations. If you like the cartoonish reality of Barbie and you want to see other films that do something like this, I would go watch Warren Beatty's Dick Tracy and the Flintstones movie with John Goodman.
Just total commitment to the source material and translating that into a live action format.
But I think that while I love those other two movies, I think Barbie does it the best because it also allows itself the space with the comparison to the real world to juxtapose the cartoonish reality. And so we get a Barbie Land car accident or whatever when they flip over and they go, whoa, and they land, and that's a great moment of visual comedy, and you know, her braid is flying around, so like it sells the reality of that. And then we get an actual car sequence. And compared to Barbie, it's a lot less exciting.
Well,
but let's get into it.
Should we talk about the Chevy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Barbie, sponsored by General Motors. It's not just the cars in the real, it's like every single car in this movie is General Motors. They got the Hummers, they got the Suburbans, they got whatever, the Cruise. I'm on fire
like
with these cars
Equinox
right now.
Or a Cruise or something. But I noted to Abram last night, because him and I were talking about it as we watched the film a little bit, that yes, there seems to be this inclination to cut back to the exterior of the cars quite a bit. Just while dialogue is happening, and also that it feels like a Chevy commercial.
They're all brand new. The cars are way too shiny.
2024.
They like literally, and they're the newest models. You can just tell.
But anyway, my point being that yes, it feels so much different than the rest of the film, and I have to knock Barbie as a whole for that.
Sure.
That it. For as much as it like lampshades the sort of corporate thing, it was like, isn't Will Ferrell as the CEO of Mattel funny? Oh, they're already making a blockbuster movie about Ken. Teehee. It's like, okay, but you don't do any of that for the Chevy thing, and even if you did, it wouldn't excuse it. because it feels like it impedes on the directorial vision of Greta Gerwig.
Totally.
I think that the Chevy stuff is part of the reason why I don't think that the snub of Greta Gerwig is that crazy.
Yeah.
I really think that a lot of this movie is not directed by her. That whole section is clearly imposed upon
There's a second unit director doing that car chase.
Right.
It is not Greta Gerwig in a car saying, "Oh, let's make the camera go woo around the side." But absolutely not.
But it's such a centerpiece of the film, and I think this is part of the problem, and it's part of the problem I think with Barbie as a whole. I think that the meta humor serves another key function, which is to try to distract you from how obviously incongruent a lot of the elements in the movie are.
That's fair.
And I
totally true.
And the Chevy whole thing is a critical component of this. Mm-hmm. But I also do feel the same way about the role of Mattel as the villain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
I'll throw it in there. The role as Ken as a villain too. Also,
yeah.
You explain and then I'll elaborate.
Yeah, my problem with the Mattel stuff is similar to the problem with the Chevy stuff. The problem with the Chevy stuff, it feels like you're just not supposed to notice because there's no jokes about it. There's no bringing attention to it. You're just supposed to be immersed in the world of the car they want you to buy. With the Mattel stuff, I have a hard time reading it as anything other than Mattel trying to launder their own image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's extremely hard to escape this idea. Mattel, as much as you want to have really good headlines about Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach and Margot Robbie writing the script and fighting for the script and fighting for changes, I would be incredibly surprised if their ideal script didn't included all this Mattel shit. Now, I understand that it has to be in there. There's no world of this movie is made without it. But there's also no doubt to me that as a viewer, this is Mattel like trying to come and put their arm around you, like, hey, person, we're your friend, we're a company, we're your friend.
Go watch our other 40 announced Mattel films.
40
that were based on Mattel products. Just happened to drop that news story after the success of Barbie. Don't worry about it too much, though.
Yeah, and I think, like, I just have a hard time escaping that's inauthentic. I think that, and it does, I don't think less of fucking Greta Gerwig or Noah Baumbach or anything. Because, again, I think that at the highest level, the messaging of this film is very important, and I'm very glad that it's out and it reached so many people. But there's also no doubt in my mind that they are laundering the image of Mattel. No, that is what the movie is doing, and that to me is a big negative.
Yeah,
I do agree, and I think that is, if I were to personally levy criticism, it would be this, where the movie sits in an awkward place of having writers and jokes that are kind of anti-capitalist, but then also having a production that is clearly very hyper-capitalist. And I
don't think this movie is anti-capitalist at all. I think this movie...
no, I just think that having criticisms of the boardroom and of the process and the history and, we canceled this because it was weird and stuff. Like, there is definitely like a self-referentiality about that I think does feel like I don't expect that from a company. But I think even though that I do consider that a criticism, and it's something that I definitely consider when talking and thinking about this movie, the reason why it doesn't impact my enjoyment of it is because ultimately, I think on a scope level of the film, the directorial hand, and I know none of you are necessarily agreeing with this, but I just want to reiterate, the directorial hand does still come down on Gerwig's side and on the side of the creativity and the fact that they're able to have Mattel as a villain and poke fun at it is, yes, laudering the image of Mattel, but it also fits in with the tone of the rest of the film. And I think that it does contribute to the self-referentiality that does, and the lightheartedness that keeps this film feeling the way that it does. And so I noticed those elements, and I think that it would be really interesting to write a paper about the way that this film was made in this system, and that also pokes fun at it a little bit, but as an experience. And I think as when I'm thinking about it as an artistic expression of Greta Gerwig, I notice those as elements that are required to make this movie what it was, but not big enough to where it takes away from me experiencing what Greta Gerwig wanted to convey. Because I think that like 86% of the time that's really well conveyed, and then just the other chunk of that. 86.5.
So here's what I will say. That I don't think that the poking fun is necessarily like Greta Gerwig getting these jokes through or whatever, because that's like the mode that that corporations operate in now.
Not to get all Mark Fisher and capitalist realism on you, but like it's hip and cool as the system to hate the system. That's cool and it's fine, and we can all do it, and the corporations can do it too, even though they ain't gonna stop supporting the system.
I would be remiss to say that if we rewind ourselves about a year, we were talking about a little film called Top Gun Maverick around this time, and Timo opened that review, comparing it to a like Nazi propaganda, but more broadly a point about how it is military propaganda, and none of us disputed that point. I also recall that we didn't talk about it a whole lot in the review, and it certainly impact our overall feelings on the film. So. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out maybe a little bit of hypocrisy on our part here.
I disagree entirely.
Okay, here we go.
I don't think that's remotely fair.
Okay.
Because the difference is that the script of Top Gun Maverick is implicitly pro-American imperialism and military.
Right.
That's implicitly true 100%.
And it never tries to say that it isn't during the runtime of that movie.
No.
That's a fair point, I suppose.
Barbie operates so obviously and overtly in the text of the film to make Mattel a likable figure.
Okay.
There's a massive difference between that and what like Top Gun Maverick is doing.
Well, we're making the fucking the U.S. government and the Top Gun program a likable figure.
I actually agree with Tanner here, and I also think that it comes down on the fact that Mattel is still portrayed as the aggressive capitalist villain in that they are trying to put Barbie back in the box, and that they do like it points out that it's just a bunch of yes men like it at a corporation. It is obviously making fun of itself, but it is yes, it's a funny bumbling villain, but they're still the villain of that. I think in the same way that it's implicit, but it's like played for jokes, and it's like I think that they're actually more comparable, like Tanner.
I mean, I would just say this: if to criticize this, I need to retroactively say that Top Gun Maverick is U.S. propaganda. I'm happy to do that.
Well, no, it's not that. But it's that we didn't necessarily display that as a knock against the film explicitly.
Yeah, but again, it does come back to me to intent.
Okay,
I just do not believe that Mattel is ever actually that villainous. Now, obviously, they're villainous in the way like a Scooby-Doo villain is villainous. They're always making jokes. They're always having fun. They're rollerblading around. Barbie has to go do her hair. Whoops, we lost her. Oh, we're running around the fucking Jacques Tati
It's fucking Will Ferrell being a doofus, essentially,
Yeah.
instead of Ed Harris being like, you're too goddamn old, Maverick.
Yeah, I think it's a difference between what is implicitly ideologically true about literally all war media to an extent, and all Marvel media, which gets all of their shit from the U.S. military,
right?
Or this film that is overtly in the script writing the characters of Mattel in a goofy way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a difference.
Okay, that's fair.
I think the reason why maybe it feels a little bit more obvious here is that this isn't something we see done often to this level of success. Is that we see a lot of war movies, and to us, accepting that there is propaganda and that they're getting funding from the government and from the military is just a thing that happens in movies so much that it wouldn't necessarily be fair to criticize Top Gun Maverick when so many of our other favorite action movies also do something like this, or something like that. But in Barbie, I mean, I don't really know almost any movies that are made by a giant corporation and that do this sort of self-effacing but also cleaning up of their image thing. It's kind of unique to Barbie. I mean, it's not entirely unique. It certainly exists in other areas, but we've never talked about that on Quest, certainly. And so I do think that it stands out a little bit more and feels a little bit stranger in our mind because it's something that hasn't been normalized. Not saying that if this continues and Mattel does make 40 movies and we do feel like it's normalized, that's a good thing. But I do think that that's why it stands out more as a criticism here than Top Gun Maverick, which we talked about it, but ultimately, it's just like it's a part of it. But like,
ultimately, last I'll say on it.
Okay.
Last I'll say on it, and then you can go Timo. Ultimately, what's more harmful, the military-industrial complex or Mattel?
It's like it's Mattel. Like I think that
Mattel.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Let's talk
they
about.
made little girls feel bad about themselves.
Let's talk about this. Let's do it. A feminist text. I want to bring in.
Do we have to? I wanted to talk about Ken first.
I want to talk about Ken. I'm talking about Ken. I'm doing both at the same time.
Okay.
Because
I'm a canonist.
I think that it's a little bit unfortunate of Ken's character to actually have such an excellent and well-written and well-thought-out arc. Ken is like a brilliant character in this movie, and I believe that at times he very much upstages Barbie in like the dramatic stakes, as well as sometimes I believe like Ryan Gosling upstages Margot Robbie in the performance. And that's unfortunate because like this movie really needs to be shoveling its coal in the other direction. Like it needs to be talking and supporting Barbie a little more. It's like I like that this plot of Ken's and the transformation that his character goes through is so like well fleshed out, but it's like maybe should put that effort another way to the other character, the one that's like this movie's more about. That's kind of what my thoughts are on about it. But I mean, it's like it's couched praise, I guess. Praise, but not.
I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the situation of Ken in the narrative is really interesting. Because I agree with you, Timo, that if we went on like a performance level, I think that Ryan Gosling is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, as Tanner and I were saying, it's like every facet. He's, I said when we were watching it, he has the new Tyler Durden body.
Yes.
He's built like a fucking god in this movie.
He's built like a doll.
He's built like
an action figure.
But it's funny because Ken was never like shredded. That's the thing. Like a Ken doll is not fucking built to shit.
Yeah, he had sort of like a twink build, you know, where he doesn't have a lot of body fat, but he's not like super muscly.
He's actually a lot closer to Alan than he is to Ken. But I'm just saying that in a sense that like the physical performance from Gosling is great. The way that he's leaning on his saloon doors or playing his guitar and making eyes at Margot Robbie, I think that's really awesome. I love the performance entirely, and I think it's 100% deserving of a nomination just like Margot Robbie should have gotten the nomination. When it comes to the situation of Ken in the narrative as it relates to Barbie, I don't really know what to make of it. I do think that there is something of a, like, eat the rich catharsis to Barbie as it relates to gender dynamics.
Okay.
Because essentially the Kens go from...
It's the menu for women.
That's funny, and I don't totally disagree with that. I think that what this film is obviously, and correct me if I'm wrong here.
Okay, here we go.
Inverting the gender roles.
I'll get my guys on this.
Hold on a goddamn second, April.
Gender studies professor over here.
And where the film ends is not like a sense of either equality or equity.
Yeah.
In as much as it is, man, the Kens are still fucking stupid.
Well, it's I think the joke is that they leveled the playing field. Is that you can't have a Supreme Court justice, but you can't have a lower appellate court position. Is it like, and if the Kens work real hard, they can get to where women are today in the real world.
Yeah, and
it's leveling the playing field, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that Barbie is largely without any sort of like solution. Not that it needs to have one.
Yeah,
but it's got a lot of good observations. And it goes back to my point. And all I really have to say about this as a feminist text, I'm not trying to like debate the theory or anything.
Fair.
Is that
I'm not either, really.
I just think that the importance of Barbie, and I've said this already, is that the culture as we continue to move in a more and more regressive direction, and people like Andrew Tate gain more and more popularity, and we've gone from like just like structural misogyny to interpersonal misogyny again in some ways in American culture. I feel is pretty obvious. So I think a movie like Barbie, so clearly observing the state of the world as it is and pointing that out to the audience
and satirizing it in a very clear, it's, you know, satire requires a clarity of purpose and what is the other part? A specific target or something? What's the quote? I don't know, but this film succeeds in its satirical qualifications.
Yeah, so I think that the feminist stuff is really good. The imbalance between the Kens and the Barbies, the ultimate role of Ken, the ultimate sort of like it's not like a re-oppression of Ken, but it kind of is that.
There's a greater, as I said in my plot summary, there's a greater understanding gained between the Barbies and the Kens.
Yeah.
You know, if they fucking do a Ken movie and Greta Gerwig or Noah Baumbach is involved to some degree. I'm sure it'll flesh more of that out because there are ideas put out. Is that the Barbies don't know where the Kens live or what they do.
Right. Right.
And of course that comes with the inversion of gender dynamics in Barbie Land, of course, is that there's just like a vague, loose idea of the idea of Kens, and they're sort of they're not really cared about in the same way.
I think that the reality of Barbie in Barbie Land, in its cartoonish nature, and using that cartoonish nature to satirize things that we take for granted in modern day, and the way that patriarchy comes and flips out and then makes it hyper cartoonish patriarchy where the Mount Rushmore is horses and they're all watching The Godfather or whatever.
The Godfather.
It's a kind of satire that I don't feel is almost at all touched in modern blockbuster films. I mean, we don't get many studio comedies anymore, especially not released theatrically. So seeing a movie with this level of satire from a big studio and to this level of success, I think is really, really refreshing. And taking a needle with its satire to gender dynamics and patriarchy, I think is like that. All that stuff I think works completely all the way through. Especially when they've reached the real world for the first time, and we're getting into sexism and how the gender dynamics are then flipped in the real world. And so she goes over to the construction site. She's like, let's get some girl power. Like these and then especially when Ken discovers
toxic masculinity
and patriarchy for the first time, and he rides up the escalator, and there's it's horses and George Bush and eagles and
Clinton. It's Bill Clinton.
Oh,
it's
sorry,
so
Clinton.
funny. That is like,
and then we cut to the straight montage, and it ends on 3 images of Sylvester Stallone in various leather or fur coats. Looks which Ryan Gosling recreates later in the film, which is just a great, sort of attribute that to the costume designers here. That obviously it's fantastic.
The costume designers are firing on all cylinders. Every single look, excellent.
They're fucking knocking it out of the.
They're doing accuracy and they're doing creativity both at the same time.
Timo did say something I want to get your opinion on, though.
Okay.
Because, Timo, you mentioned that it feels like they're shoveling out of coal into the Ken fire. And I think that is interesting. And I don't disagree that it does feel like Ken has a more universal problem than Barbie does. Now, I'm also a man. So it's not lost on me that I'm probably implicitly more resonating with what Ken is dealing with. But ultimately, the heart of Ken's struggle, even though on a surface level, it is largely about toxic masculinity and him as like a comedic conduit for that, it is sort of just about him like feeling lost and being unsure how to identify when he's not not deriving his identity from Barbie. And I do think that in some ways that is kind of richer than what Barbie has to deal with. And
So this is the thing.
What I'm on about.
This is a whole other can of Barbie. It's a whole other can of like Barbie discourse. Essentially, is the arc of Barbie versus the arc of Ken and how they intersect at the very end of the film. They're both on a journey of self-actualization. That's like basically without discussion. And the issues therein are sort of like Barbie comes to sort of understand this from outside influence. She is sort of thrust into the narrative because of things beyond her control. Ken has these feelings already, but cannot put them into words because he doesn't have context for them. So they both go into the real world to gain context for their lack of individuality and identity. And the arcs are very different, of course. Ken becomes like a villainous and antagonistic force because he misinterprets, or maybe probably not misinterprets, just takes the lessons of patriarchy and inflicts them upon a world that has never dealt with them before, and just basically slams that accelerator all the way to the
without understanding that it's a bad thing.
Without understanding that's a bad thing, and he's doing it largely out of a revenge and reactionary position to not being valued.
It's much like Louis Strauss. It's like a petty revenge that ends up ballooning to something worse.
And there's also the romance element to it as well. That he's like he's miffed.
Unrequited romance.
Yeah, he's miffed about the unrequited romance.
Which I think is a really interesting spin to have this movie. a female-led blockbuster film that is explicitly anti-relationship between the two protagonists, I think is really interesting.
So how we end these characters is Barbie becomes a real person. Okay, she sort of feels these emotions and comes to fruition. Is like, I no longer want to be an idea. Being an idea is fucking exhausting, and there's a whole lot of shit that's projected onto me. Kind of like being a woman in the real world, but I digress. Being idealized. America Ferrera, the monologue. Maybe we'll talk about it. Maybe we won't.
It's a good monologue. That's all I have to say about it.
Okay. Yeah. Is that you are idealized and you're put upon and you're told you can be anything, just like Barbies have all these different professions, and it builds up an expectation that you have to be something of value and that your innate value is not enough. That's Barbie's arc. Boom. Put pencils down. Ken.
Pin in it.
Yeah. What happens with Ken is that he becomes self-actualized, but there's a very sort of up and down scene between him and Barbie at the end, where he interprets her kindness as romantic interest. You know, and another clear parallel to real
who among us hasn't
woman.
fallen for that one? I mean,
but many people have criticized the fact that Barbie apologizes to Ken at the end for leading him on or doing any other number of things, and that is an issue that many people have with the film. I feel that criticism is accurate. That's one of the few that I think hold water at the end of this thing.
I think it's not necessarily an apology for leading him on, but an apology for not discussing it with him, for not explaining that it was unrequited. And like the leading him on was obviously never intentional on her end, but it was the fact that they never talked. She never explained that this was going to be a thing. And so like by default, he continued it. And so I think she was like, look, I'm apologizing because I never recognized you as a person, frankly. I like, you were just this other guy off in the distance, and it was Barbie and Ken, and you're just kind of a joke.
Yeah.
But I feel the apology is a lot more sincere in that it's not about leading him on, but that she didn't recognize him as a person and never understood the feelings that he was having as something that was problematic and could lead to them having a healthier relationship if they talked about it.
I agree with Tucker completely. That's exactly how I view that.
The bottom line there is that, yeah. The bottom line that there is, I think that dialogue could have used a tune-up there, because I think the words used do lean towards an uncharitable reading of it, perhaps. As well as the fact that Ken never apologizes to Barbie for doing what he did.
Yeah, and
he gets to scream his self-actualization from the rooftop, quite literally, and run down a slide and wear a silly little sweater that you can buy at Mattel.com
for $60.
For $60, and there's never an apology to Barbie, and never really a reckoning with what he's done.
Sorry,
you
Tanner.
used to blow my nose at the beginning when I was sneezing a bunch. Remember?
I want to split the atom between you guys.
Okay,
I agree with you.
Barbenheimer.
Yeah, Oppenheimer, Everett.
Barbenheimer. I agree with both of you guys to different extents. What I think is universally important about...
Split the Allen?
Yes.
That's fair enough.
Yes.
I think the reason... What I derive from the Ken arc in a positive direction is this idea of becoming your own person.
Yes.
And not deriving your identity based on your, like, position to somebody else. But by buying the Ken product. But if we put that aside, I do think that is, again, ultimately highest level, transcending the come by the I'm Kenough sweatshirt is a good message.
Yeah.
The romantic stuff, though, I agree is handled poorly. Because if you look at what Ken is he basically is an incel.
Yeah, I was going to say that why he's angry is the same reason incels are angry.
Yeah,
it's self-imprisoned because he's seeking validation from women and also men to a certain extent.
It's not. It's more that he feels as incels do, because I love watching Hassan Piker react to documentaries about incels.
Right.
And incel
documentaries.
Typical Saturday night for Abram Buner right there.
That stuff on YouTube.
There are a lot of incel documentaries. Incels feel entitled to not only the attention, but the sexual gratification of women. That is exactly what Ken feels. Ken feels he is entitled to a relationship with Barbie. He thinks that he can just kiss Barbie, he can do whatever, because Barbie is in some ways bound to give him what he wants. And I do agree that her apologizing, he not apologizing, does not deconstruct or properly destroy the pseudo incel ideology that is motivating Ken throughout the movie.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that for me, I never really thought of that as an issue because I just think it accurately reflects their character personalities. Like, it would feel pretty out of character, especially for the comedic tone that Ken has had for the entire movie, to give a genuine apology. And because if he gave an apology and it was matching the tone and personality that Ken has had for the last 1 hour and 40 minutes, it would be an apology that's undercut by a joke and has a jab in it, and he does a backflip while he's doing it or something. And I do think that would also in some ways equally undercut it. So I don't disagree that it would have been interesting to have it, but I think it matches the writing of the character.
But you can also just write a genuine apology. I mean, because
Barbie gets a dozen genuine moments.
Yeah, because she's a genuine person. He's not a genuine person.
But that's because Ken has to learn.
Sure.
Ken doesn't learn. He can have a moment where he apologizes and then he completes his character arc.
And he's not really a person by the end of the film either.
Sure.
He's on the way, I would say, but he's not got there at all like Barbie has.
Yeah. You gotta leave something for Ken.
The Ken movie.
Is this a real thing?
They like half an hour.
They've discussed it.
Okay.
It's certainly not announced.
Greta Gerwig has been asked if she would come back for a sequel or a spin-off or something, and she's like, no.
What would that look
Good
like
for her?
Yeah,
so
she's gonna go make a couple movies for Netflix.
On the serious Ken note, I would just like to say that I think this film also does a fair bit of legwork and with the idea of how men are impacted by the patriarchy and toxic masculinity.
Sure.
There's a couple joke lines that I think are sort of hold within them some real thinking and theories about this, such as how Ryan Gosling has a sort of feud with Simu Liu Ken, and how he's concerned that Simu Liu Ken
part of the film
will steal Barbie from him.
Yeah,
and how it happens quite early on actually, where he says. He's like, you think Ken's cooler than me, and she's like, Ken's not cool. Yeah. And then Ryan Gosling says he is to me, and that it's sort of like the self-comparison thing that obviously drives a lot of toxic masculinity, I feel. So I think those ideas are here. I just don't feel that they're fully brought to fruition in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Can I pivot to a filmmaking thing?
Sure, go for it.
I have one other major criticism of the movie.
Okay.
And maybe it's a hot take.
I was going to compliment the movie, but whatever.
Well, because we end on the compliments then.
Okay.
I think that the movie doesn't look good.
Okay.
And I want to separate.
I kind of agree with you. It's like a cinematography problem. It's like
I agree 100%.
It's I can describe to you the exact methods.
Who also did Killers of the Flower Moon.
Really? The same?
Really?
Because this movie is is pretty bland. Look like I would say lighting and shot composition wise, every single scene is lit with a really harsh and hard backlight. So you get these really rims and you get the little frizzly flyaway hairs on every single shot, with then a very soft, no key to fill, equal key to fill ratio on the face. A very soft light. This is how all of the scenes at Barbie Land look, and all of the scenes in the real world look. It's like, I will use my own lighting here. There's a noticeable difference on this kind of rim that I have going, even though I've flattened the key and the fill out on both sides of my face. Barbie's like that the whole time, but I'm trying to have a view of my face so you can see my face and how my eyebrows move and stuff. But you don't actually need that in a film. In a cinematic theater going experience, you kind of want there to be differences and the lighting to communicate stuff and mean things. And so I just found the shots to be really bland. And, the car commercial in the middle, doesn't help because it's shot exactly like a Chevy ad. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of because the production design and the costumes and the other elements of how the film looks are great, but the photography is lacking, which...
that's exactly what I was going to say. I think that...
But he knows the technical terms, so it's better than you described it.
It is. That's 100% true. I'm not going to lie about that. The production design in the film is exceptional. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
We've already had a discussion. We all think it's not only going to win production design, but deserves to win production design.
Right.
And I think that really does carry the look of the film. Right. I think that the cinematography is unremarkable at best. I think that not many shots are that interestingly framed.
Yeah, that's true.
Or blocked. I actually feel like there's sometimes when people inhabit the frame weirdly, especially when you're in Barbie Land. There's so much more interesting shit in the background than just throw like two people like on either side of the 50% line down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it actually looks that good. I don't think that the technical like filming of this is to the standard of the production design. The sets do so much heavy lifting, I think.
Yeah, and I think that probably mostly comes from this being a studio comedy. Is that this is for mass audiences,
filmed in the studio comedy too,
on stages, and with mostly framing for joke potential. It's supposed to get out of the way for the masses, and it's not. And I think that is just intentional in the delivery of this movie for its audience and for where its quality lies in other areas. I do think that in the mind of Warner Brothers making a film that is for mass audiences and is a studio comedy, you don't want the shot to be so cool and like depth of field is being played with and the camera angle is like off in the other corner or whatever, because it's supposed to focus on the actors doing their joke and that being incredibly visually clear for the layperson who are the people watching this movie. And so I understand that that reasoning. I agree that it could have been done in a more interesting way, and I think that Barbie could have been a more artistically interesting film. But I think for the intent of Barbie, I actually don't prefer, but I do understand and in some ways respect the decision to have the cinematography and lighting be more simple and maybe not good, but more simple for the intent of what this movie is going for. Because I do think that it does allow, again, for the intent of this movie, the production design and the performances to stand out in a way that they could have worked with better framing and better lighting. Absolutely, they could have. But I think it works for Barbie. And I didn't notice it. I'm thinking back, like, yeah, okay, it's mostly like, two shots and like medium shot stuff. It's not particularly interesting in a framing way, but so it doesn't impact my viewing experience, but I understand the critique.
One sequence that I think looks especially good, this is me segueing into a positive that I wanted to talk about, is the I'm Just Ken, what many people have dubbed a dream ballet for that musical number. It is hearkening back to, sort of studio musicals of years past.
Your Ziegfeld Follies, your Gigi's.
Yes.
We know them, we love them.
Card in the corner.
It's sort of held in stage and choreographed in this liminal space that is a massive and endless, apparently, but also has a soft, like, blue light and a soft pink light to it. And it's all the Kens, and they're in their, like, grease outfits, another reference back to a montage thing that Ken saw earlier. Their black t-shirts and their black jeans and everything. And it is staggering. We've talked a lot, and I think, Tucker, you've especially done a good job of shouting out how the Barbie, at the end of the day, feels so unique and different than everything else we've been getting in our recent cinematic diet. And I'm Just Ken, to me, is a perfect encapsulation of that. It is a comedy beach battle that transcends into a choreographed music number that has a bunch of extras in the back doing the numbers where Ryan Gosling is putting on a fur coat and like doing a rocky motion towards the camera and belting out these like jokey lines about his blonde fragility and things like that. It's amazing to me. I love this sequence so much. I love this song. It's from Mark Ronson, who people might know from Uptown Funk, I guess. But it's amazing. I love this scene so much. It's like a perfect moment, and I remember hearing Greta Gerwig saying that she fought so hard to do this like third act musical number. There's no other really like character singing musical number previous to the film. Yeah. There are needle drops and even like dance party sequences, but this is Ryan Gosling singing to the camera and the chorus of Ken's behind him. And it's amazing, and I love it so much.
Mm-hmm. I think it also highlights another aspect of this film that we have not yet to touch on, but again, much like Oppenheimer is one of the biggest things I have to praise about this movie, is that supporting cast is just right down the line. Yes. There are so many Barbies and so many Kens that are giving such phenomenal performances that my eyes always darting out of the frame because of my, especially on this third watch because I've seen the movies before, but I was like, I want to look somewhere else in the frame this time and look at someone else's face to see the performance that they're giving, and it's equally as compelling and interesting. And the fact that we get different Barbies and different Kens that have
John Cena's in this movie.
Styles,
I'm just looking at
it. Is for a tiny little bit.
Yeah.
That have different visual styles, but also slightly different personalities, and the way that they react to things is so much fun. And the ones that stick out to me are obviously Simu Liu, which we've pointed out that I think this is easily his best performance, or my favorite performance of his, because he's really leaning into his physicality and his acrobat.
He's being like a jock Ken, essentially.
Yeah. But he also is like a dancer jock Ken, in the way that Simu Liu likes to do choreography and has a more ballet sensibility to the way that he moves around in a sequence. He's really leaning into that here, and his comedic timing is great. But and I think that Alexander Shipp and Emma Mackey are my two favorite supporting Barbies. And then my all-time winner of the maybe like my favorite supporting cast member of this entire year is Kingsley Ben-Adir as Ken's like
wacky.
Yeah, he's just like his buddy that's always by his side and doing things. But he has like a meekness about him. He has like he's like not quite confident, so he's always like looking around. He's like doing these things, and every sequence that he's in, I just look in the back of the frame and he's doing something stupid, and he doesn't quite know how to handle himself. And I'm like, he is like, there's this the moment when she has flat feet and she's on the beach, and he like picks up his binoculars and he looks over. I'm like, his comedic timing is so good, and he's vomiting in the background.
Stop it, Ken.
Oh my God, it's so funny.
The tag to that character, which I feel is so good too. And again, I want to harken back to the comedic sensibilities of Gerwig and Baumbach, is what he's gifted the fur coat at the end of the film, and he turns and he lowers his voice an octave, and he's like, "We were only fighting because we didn't understand ourselves." And it's a fucking perfect way to get the last line out of that character.
So funny,
I want to shout out Michael Cera too.
Yeah,
sorry,
as
Tim,
Alan. Michael Cera, Kate McKinnon,
perfectly used.
Oh,
every time we cut to him, I laugh.
And just casting. I think this film does, casting Academy Award win 2026, right? Like, this is a film that could win for casting because it's just straight down the line, exactly right, perfect, every person. I mean, Kate McKinnon.
I even love like a couple of the secondary like CEO lackeys. I think that the guy that comes from the lower floor is really funny. He has great comedic timing.
Is he the one that gets shot, or is that
no?
One.
That's like the guy that like literally sits next to Will Ferrell that delivers the line about
the young fathers,
two wise trees doing a podcast,
or a choir full of 2,000 young fathers.
It's so funny, dude.
Oh man, it's a really fucking funny movie.
It's so funny. And even the production design is funny. I mean, we talked about how good the production is, but I think it's the details that really sell it. I laughed out loud when I can't remember the character's name, but the guy that hears about the Barbie in the real world first
Aaron
time.
Dinkins.
Aaron Dinkins, sir.
Aaron Dinkins.
Aaron Dickinson?
He's talking to a couple of his coworkers, and they're like, "No one goes all the way up. That's crazy. Don't go all the way up." And he steps in the elevator and he presses the all the way up button. And I'm like, that is so good. It's it's only on screen for like half a second. They don't call attention to it. I mean, the shot is on it, but like, I'm like, oh my God, that's so funny. In the moment
it's explicitly called attention.
I know, but it's not like
it gets an insert.
I'm gonna hit the all the way up
moment to like laugh about it necessarily. And another just small thing, another detail is when Barbie steps into the box and they have these two guys winding giant zip ties on the boxes, big like boom, boom. I'm like, they cared so much.
Tim, I cut you off. Was there a member of the ensemble that you wanted to shout out here?
I was gonna just shout out Kate McKinnon as Weird Barbie. I think that her comedic sensibilities are great, and playing this very offbeat, kooky character is just very well done. I really like that character too, because it's like, who among us hasn't had like the toy that you just abused but you still played with, and like that. I think that concept of her character is very universal, and excellently placed within the narrative as kind of this like sage oracle type character. Well, like oracle, I say, like literally there's the Matrix reference with the Birkenstock and the high heel. Like I kind of love the film references in this movie. Like they're very film bro. They're like, Gerwig is like
well, yes,
calling out all the film bros, and it's like I am sitting there like being called out, but it's also funny, and it's the jokes that I make about those movies, I feel like, or if I would make those same jokes, I guess.
the name drop of the Zack Snyder Justice League
full
is
name
maybe
drop.
a joke intended for 1% of this film's audience, maybe.
Yeah.
I think every single person I've talked to about this are like, yeah, my theater didn't laugh for that joke because no one fucking understands that joke. It's only you, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, who understand what that means.
And some people sitting across from me right there.
Well, yes, and us. Yes, and us. One last thing I want to say, and this is getting back to the is Barbie feminist theory.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a lot of discussion to this end, especially when this film came out. It has died down a bit, and now it's just largely love for Barbie and sort of anger that Greta Gerwig was snubbed and so on and so forth. But to that end of like, is Barbie feminist? Is it an oversimplification? Is it corporations cashing in on the popularity of mainstream feminist sort of thinking and ideology and stuff? I will say that no, Barbie is not feminist theory. If you're going to it to like learn something about the ideology, re-examine what you're thinking, I would say.
If you're a person watching a Quest video, you probably have a better understanding of feminist theory than 98% of the American population, and they're the people that watch this movie.
And this is what I wanted to talk about, is because if you go on social media, especially when this film released, I at least saw plenty of videos of young women going to see this film, talking about A, how much it moved them, which is amazing, and B, going to see it with probably their Midwestern, I'm not political boyfriends who didn't get it, who they got into arguments about the film with and then broke up with. And I'm like, good, probably. If your boyfriend cannot understand the, like, baby's first
baby
feminism
level
lessons that Barbie is
My
delivering,
boyfriends do.
yeah, then you probably shouldn't hang out with him as a woman. That's just my perspective on it. I was like, ultimately, it's a categorical good to put this kind of movie out, and it gets back to what Abram was saying about the sort of regressive tendencies we're seeing in terms of feminism and, you know, the prevalence of misogyny and misogynistic figures rising to the surface a little bit more in popular culture. It's a fucking perfect movie to be number one at the box office because it pisses off all the right people, I should say.
Well, this is what I had said this movie came out because the previous highest grossing film of the year was a Super Mario Brothers movie.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Super Mario Brothers movie not only has no thematic meaning, it has no plot level meaning either. The movie's basically about nothing. Now I really like it because it's things I recognize.
It's Mario. Yeah.
But I agree. I do not believe that film should be escapism. I think that you can escape into a movie, but I think you should learn something. You should take something away with you when you come out the other side. And I think that's what Barbie is. So even though I do have pretty significant both like filmmaking and like writing and thematic issues with the movie, I do ultimately think that it is astoundingly important that this happened. And I don't agree with people that are like, oh, you know, Greta Gerwig sold out. Oh, she's in the big old Hollywood making fucking Warner Brothers movies machine now.
Yeah.
Because maybe she is,
Like,
but again,
I don't know. You made Lady Bird. Like,
Yeah.
you really can't argue that A24 is different than the rest of the machine at this point.
Also, if we're going to allow 1 million men to sell out to studios, can we allow one woman to do it, maybe?
Like,
Hey,
yeah.
what about Patty Jenkins and
What about-
Chloe Zhao?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, they all sort of came up around the same time.
You're
didn't they?
allowed
That's very
to
interesting.
get your bag. That's what I'm saying. You're allowed to get your bag.
Yeah.
this is also about 10 times better than Eternals or Wonder Woman 1984. So like,
Yes, many times. Yeah.
Thank you
I
for
just
selling
think-
out and making it good.
Sorry, it's okay. I'm sorry.
Don't offend. Don't insult my.
It's
Turtles.
okay, and I'm sorry.
I just have one final thing to call out, which is my favorite line of this movie.
Okay.
Which is when I don't necessarily really like the scene because I don't really know what it means, but when Barbie goes into like the fucking mythical tea room with Ruth Handler, like,
Yeah.
what the hell is this? But there's a really good line in there. Obviously, a couple good moments of acting, as I mentioned earlier. But when she says, "The real world isn't what I thought it was," and then Ruth responds, "It never is, and isn't that marvelous?"
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a really good line.
Yeah.
It's delivered with warmth, and it makes you like. One interesting thing about Barbie is it's about the unpredictability of life, and that life does come with ups and downs and everything in between, and you can't predict what's coming next. But it's always important to believe in yourself, and these are simple themes, but I think especially that line really encapsulates the warmth and hope that I think this movie really does carry with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say for my final note on this film is that a piece of comedy that really did land for me is the tag scene. This Barbie becoming a real person and going to the
Yes.
gynecologist is just hilarious and just a perfect note to end the film on. Like,
Mhm.
absolutely, you fully understand your characters and your arcs and everything that this movie's trying to do when you end it at that place. Like, I love that ending. It's perfect.
One thing I will say about that ending, and one of the reasons I really like it, is because the movie does also, and the America Ferrera speech, which we didn't really touch on.
Yeah, you just said it was. You're the only one who said something about it, and that it's good.
And it's good. I think out of context, it is cringy, but I
Granted.
think in the context of the film, it works better.
Yeah.
And I also think that one of the good and deeper points of this film is that, like, women have to go be like a lawyer or the fucking scientist, whatever, and
Or the president.
Yeah, and Barbie is like the things that little girls should be based on Barbie are these huge, massive, high profile, big responsibility, very, very top of society roles. And America Ferrera and the idea of ending on the gynecologist is this idea of like it is okay. It's actually not okay. It's great to just be happy with being ordinary and comfortable with your life and comfortable with living something that just makes you feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
So ordinary Barbie's gonna make him a lot of money.
I do like the idea that the movie ends not with Barbie, going to join like the Barbie Supreme Court or whatever, but just saying like, hey, I'm happy and I'm living this just life.
Yeah.
And that's good shit.
They need your monologue to get you an Oscar, but it can't be too cringy, but it has to be earnest.
Let's see what the score of this film is. You guys ready?
Yes.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, we've got a bit of a range here. The score is 8.2. That is going to slot the film in between, below the holdovers, and above the zone of interest. By 1 point above zone of interest. The point breakdown.
I thought there was a tie. That's why I gasped, by the way. I thought there was a tie for a second.
The point breakdown is Abram gave it a 7.1, I gave it a 7.5, Tanner gave it an 8.9, and Tucker gave it a 9.3. So that puts it at the 6th spot on our list.
Yeah.
There you have
Truly.
Truly.
it. Okay.
Mathematically accurate.
Yes.
Thank you, Excel spreadsheet, for helping us out.
We would have a hard time otherwise putting 8.2 above 8.1.
Yeah.
We actually do, and I don't think we ever said this on camera. We are actually hand calculating these averages.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do that. Like we do that.
I've got an
really
abacus down there.
Yeah. You ever wonder why I do the?
That's the sound effect.
Yeah, it's the sound, but it's also to be a bit of a distraction for the audience.
Right.
So they don't see it.
See
It's
us
a magic trick.
doing
If you go
math.
back
Not
and
a
watch,
hand.
if you go back and watch every Quest episode, put them at half speed, just to really make sure that you can catch it.
And you leave a comment, you like the video.
And yeah, make sure you
you
leave a
don't
comment.
skip any ads.
Don't
get any
don't
ads.
watch those ads all the way through because there's
It'll
details
be
hidden in
one day.
there too.
Mm-hmm.
No, okay.
We've got
Joke's
one
Joke's done.
final film to talk about, and it's a film we've actually
That's true.
already discussed. If you remember, Anatomy of a Fall, which is our final film that we haven't talked about, won the Palme d'Or. So we talked about it on the Palme d'Or version of this here show, but we think that it deserves a revisit for this Best Picture race. So the next episode to round out the series will be Anatomy of a Fall. We're going to be kind of just recollecting our thoughts. We've got some comments on our last video that we want to think about and talk about, but it will stand alone as its own review. No need to watch both of them. We'll be back to talk about Anatomy of a Fall. I'm excited to have some more thoughts on it and, take our viewers' inputs as well as, fresh new eyes. It's been longer it was longer ago that I saw Anatomy of a Fall than the period of rewatches for Maestro. Like I rewatched Maestro in a shorter amount of time than it's been since I saw Anatomy of a Fall. So I believe that I will get a little something extra out of it. And we all quite liked that movie. If I may, maybe I just remind our viewers what we ranked it, or should we keep it a little secret?
I think let's keep that secret and go over what our ranking is right now of the movies.
Yes.
Okay. The list as it stands, with one final film to add on to it, is Past Lives at spot number 1, followed by Killers of the Flower Moon, and then Oppenheimer. Poor Things is up next, followed by The Holdovers, and then the recent addition from today, Barbie. Up below that is The Zone of Interest, and then Maestro, and at the bottom, spot number 9, is American Fiction. So there you have it.
Very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for an enlightening discussion on this here Barbie movie. I'm looking forward to making one of these for all the rest of the 40 Mattel films that are coming out.
Again, we'll all be nominated for Best Picture.
Oh, man.
Well, until that happens, stay tuned to Backlot Banter. And as I always say, stay warm, keep cool. Peace.